Dorie Clark, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation on building your visibility. It's such a pleasure to be speaking to you.
Bhavna, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. Dorie, you have had such a brilliant career. I mean, if I look at your resume, it's definitely an enviable list of accomplishments that you have. You're a best-selling author, you're a speaker, you're an executive coach, a top 50 business thinker in the world. I can go on and on. I'm curious, over the course of this illustrious career, shall we say, that you've had, at what point did you realize that I am going to have to get intentional about building my brand and visibility because my work, as exceptional as it is not going to speak for itself?
Well, I take all my lessons from my cat, Philip, who is never afraid to brand himself publicly. Uh,
Yes.
but you raise an important question. I mean, I think in many ways, I recognized it from the beginning of starting to work for myself. I launched my business in 2006. And, and when I say my business, I mean going out on my own as an independent consultant slash executive coach. And I realized very quickly, and with this kind of rising sense of alarm, that unless I was publicly visible, I would not get hired. I would not make any money. And I was in a position where I would recommend other people do things differently. But at the time, I was so committed to sort of, doing a good job and focusing on finishing out well at the job that I had previously. I didn't worry about getting clients until literally day one of starting my business. And then I'm like, oh, how am I going to get clients? I think for almost anyone else, it's like, no, get them first, and then leave. But I realized, oh gosh, I really have to figure this out fast. And so it became a business imperative to me because I didn't really have, a fallback plan. I didn't have, the spouse or the trust fund or anything like that. So I was like, oh no, I need to do this. This is essential to the business, not just success, but even being able to keep doing the business.
Yes, absolutely. And I've seen it's equally valuable for people working inside of organizations as well, but definitely for entrepreneurs as well.
Yes. And I just want to build on that for 1 second, Bhavna, because it's
Yeah.
such an important point. It's probably more important for people who are working inside corporations, but oftentimes people don't realize it because the issue about working inside a corporation is that sometimes we get lulled into a sense of complacency because we believe that the organization, the institution will protect us somehow. And, that almost like the walls of your corporation are this, soft, fluffy pillow that will cushion any fall. And it is true and true and true and true up until it's not true. And something that really hammered it home for me was my very first job that I had as a reporter. I got laid off from. And when you get laid off, you have like an hour notice. I mean, it's just very sudden. And I hope that never happens to anybody that is watching this. But if it does, it's just so important to have in the back of your mind, you can't ever you can't afford to put yourself at risk in such a way that all the people all your network, all your connections are people you work with at your company, because they're going to be in the same boat too. We have to protect ourselves now. My most recent book is about long-term thinking. And for me, that question is, what is the thing we can do today that will make tomorrow better and easier? What's the thing we can do today, the small thing that can protect us in the future? And if we become over reliant on assuming that everything is going to stay the same tomorrow as it is today, it's a dangerous assumption to make. Having a strong brand means you are protected regardless of what happens to you, to your company, to the broader markets.
Absolutely. And in fact, I want to really dig a little deeper into some of the ideas you've shared in your book, The Long Game, which I loved. I absolutely devoured it. I recommend it to everyone. And it definitely, for me, it has shifted the way I approach several of my goals. And I know in the book, as you just highlighted, you talk about the value of committing to goals and projects over a long-term horizon. Can you tell us a little bit more about why that is important? And in particular, I'd love to hear your thoughts on when it comes to building our brand and visibility, is that something we should be playing the long game in?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part first. I think in some ways, building your brand and visibility, I think in some ways the only way we can do it is to play the long game, right? Because I think that oftentimes what gets people nervous or uncomfortable about the idea is this feeling that somehow they have to like turn on a switch and all of a sudden go from being a normal person to being, influencer person. And like somehow what we're asking is for people to like turn on the Kardashian switch, which of course is not in any way what is appropriate for people who are wanting to be regular professionals. It's a question of doing much subtler things, things that you might not even necessarily notice in the moment and that actually aren't intimidating in the moment. But I think sometimes to protect ourselves from doing the work, we create a narrative where it says, oh, if I was going to focus on branding, I would have to do blah, blah, blah. I would have to be blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to be like that. And it's a straw man. And we have to recognize that. It's kind of how I think about networking. You don't have to network the way that everybody else does, but you do have to network in some way. You have to find your path to it, because hopefully we can all agree that relationships are important in business. And similarly, you don't have to do personal branding the way that I do or that other people do. You can find your path that you feel comfortable with, but you do have to take some action. And it could be something as simple, it's just a question of how do you make yourself and your talents known to people? Not in an aggressive way, but just so they know who you are. It could be literally deciding, what, from now on, once a week, I'm going to spend 30 minutes a week having a coffee or a virtual coffee with someone that I don't know that well, but I would like to know better. If you do that over the period of a few years, that alone can become life-changing for your brand as more people, as more people and they know more about you. It's small things.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, I think I love the idea of playing a long game, especially when it comes to building my brand and my visibility as well, because I found the more I thought of it on a long-term horizon, it just allowed me to think bigger, bolder, more creatively than I would otherwise. And that's why
Yeah.
I really found it to be a game changer.
What are your best tips, Bhavna? What are the things that you've done that you feel like have moved the needle for you?
When it comes to building my brand, I think for sure having a longer term vision, I think has opened me up to experiment more, knowing that over with trial and error, I will figure it out. And so it's just made me so much more open to whether it's putting out content or reaching out to people and making these connections. I just find there's so much to learn from that, and because I'm playing this long game, it's I'm learning, I'm iterating, I'm learning, I'm iterating, and each little step is just building on itself, which has been really helpful. But I'm curious, Dorie, for me, I think what's allowing me to think long term is I am very passionate and very, very focused on my work because it is very purposeful to me. But what would you say to individuals who, because I meet such individuals all the time who would ask, well, I'm not sure about what I could be doing next, or I'm not really so passionate about what I'm doing right now. It's just a job, let's say. So how then should one think about building that brand when there's so
Yeah.
many unknowns?
Right, absolutely. So you raise an important point, because if if you already sort of know, this is my field, this is my place, then great, go nuts on it. You can do a lot of things. But if you're in a place where you're still figuring it out, it does raise the question of, is it worth it for you to be expending a lot of effort to get known as an expert in finance if, 2.5 years from now, suddenly you're working in publishing or whatever it is? And so the way that I like to think about it, I know you're familiar with this. One of the things that I've developed is what I call the recognized expert methodology. I have a recognized expert course and community, and there's really 3 pillars to it. And that is content creation. So, creating and sharing your ideas, your intellectual property around a certain field or topic or whatever it is, your network, and your social proof. And by social proof, we basically mean, what are the kind of publicly recognizable awards, laurels, the sort of shiny medals that show that other people think you're good at what you do. And so what I would suggest to people is that it's important, at all stages of our professional career to try to move the ball forward, but you can focus on different things depending where you are. So if you're in a situation where you say, you know what, I don't know if I'm in the right field, I might change fields, I would worry less about content creation, because it's not helpful for you to write 200 articles about finance if that's not going to be your thing. Instead, I would focus on things like networking, because even if, first of all, you can network with a very diverse group of people. Maybe some of them are in finance, maybe some of them are in publishing, maybe some of them can help you figure out where you want to go. Maybe some of them can help you get to that next place. But it's always helpful, because if you're building long-term trusting relationships, genuine friendships rather than, oh, I need a thing, then that's going to be a helpful asset to you for the rest of your life. And so that's a place you can really sort of invest. I think, at different stages, you can focus on different elements of the recognized expert package.
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea of having these different levers to play with as you're going about this journey. So, staying with networking for a moment, one of the objections that I get quite often, and there may be a cultural element to this, is I hear from a lot of women who will say, I know networking is important, but I'm more of an introvert. So I don't really find the idea of reaching out to someone and connecting with them very comfortable. It doesn't come naturally to me. So what would you say to someone like that? Is how can one network effectively even as an introvert?
Yeah, so this is a topic that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, certainly because I identify as an introvert too. And, to sort of clarify the terminology, sometimes people, they'll get a little aggressive. They say, no, you're not. You're speaking. You're not an introvert. But it's not about your comfort level giving talks or things like that. That's, literally a different set of criteria. Introvert versus extrovert is really just a question of, at the end of a long day socializing, do you feel more energized or less energized? That's really it. And so for me, it is tiring. I feel like, I have to be on when I'm with a lot of people, and that is kind of exhausting. And so at the end of the day, I'm like, you know what? That was great. I will go read my book now. So I can definitely relate to all of that. For me, what I have discovered, and I think hopefully this is useful to other people who are introverts as well, most of the events, the sort of standard default events that are networking events, are structured by and for extroverts. There's a reason you don't feel comfortable at them, and that's that they weren't meant for you. They were meant for extroverts, where basically all you need to do in terms of planning, this is like the lazy man's planning, is like, oh, there's a bunch of people. Okay, go talk. Like that's it. And I mean, that's great if like you love people so much, you're like, oh, fantastic, let me do that. But as an introvert, I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. It sounds like chaos. I hate that. I hate noise. I hate it when I don't know anything about the people. I hate it when you have to plunge in like, hi, I'm Dorie. Where are you from? It's just so awkward. And so what I've come to understand is that it's not that I don't like meeting people. Of course I like meeting people. Of course I like meeting friends. And I'm willing to bet that anyone you're talking to, Bhavna, who's an introvert, they probably like friends too, right? The question is, we need to take control and create our own events, our own opportunities, so that we can structure them the way that is optimal for us. And so it takes a little more effort and a little more planning. But what I've started to do, a number of years ago when I moved to New York, and it was very effective, was I would organize small dinner gatherings. And they were small, they were 6 people, 8 people, and I would invite the people that I wanted. I would send an email beforehand introducing them, and it was nice and calm and organized. And it was a great event for everybody. So that was how I was able to sort of take control and make it an introvert friendly event. So I think the issue is not, I don't like networking. It's that people don't like the networking that is presented to them. And so therefore we need to make our own options.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as you've just highlighted, irrespective of whether you identify as an introvert or extrovert, there are ways to make networking work for you and adapt it to your personality. So true. The other lever, of course, in the recognized expert framework that you talk about is this idea of sharing your ideas, sharing thought leadership, creating content. I want to talk to you both about doing that, leveraging social media as well as within an organization. Starting first with social media, and again, I'm curious to hear your objection, your thoughts around the objections that come up. A few of the concerns I hear, especially from women who are working inside of organizations, is they would say something like, oh, I'm just afraid. I don't know how it would be perceived. My organization might frown upon it. If I'm too active on, let's say, something like LinkedIn, people will think I'm looking for a job. Or my manager is not very active on social media. So if I am, I'm afraid I might be seen as a threat. So there are all manner of concerns around that. And I'm curious, what would you say, especially to people who are working within organizations and they want to put themselves out there more? How can they do that?
Yeah, it's an important question. And people, understandably worry a bit about social media because it is a public thing that other people can look at. I mean, the truth is, we all as humans tend to overestimate the amount of attention that other people are paying to us. So I mean, mostly, let's call it a good problem to have if people are actually paying enough attention and know what the heck you're doing on social media. Mostly they won't notice, they won't care unless you do something truly crazy. But that doesn't mean we don't worry about it. Obviously, I'm putting the asterisk that some people work in regulated industries. There are specific concerns if you work in financial services or pharma or something like that, that's just much tighter. And so in those cases, you may literally be restricted. You have to check your company's policies about that. But assuming that's not the case, it's true that some people, some kind of old school people, or maybe paranoid people, think that, oh, the only time you use LinkedIn is if you want a job or something like that. It's not to say you don't have a super paranoid boss, but most people don't. Most people these days understand that it is a tool for business development, for connection, for things that actually can redound to the benefit of the organization. I think the biggest question is, how do you do it in a way that feels good and authentic to you? Because sometimes, we tend to zoom around. If you're somebody who hasn't done much with LinkedIn or you feel uncomfortable with it, you might feel like, oh, I have to go, from 0 to 100. I have to, be posting all the time or something like that. And that's not true. I mean, if you haven't done much with it at all, set yourself a goal of, okay, I'm going to post once a month, or I'm going to post, once every 2 weeks. No one in the world is going to say that is an excessive amount. That's okay. You don't need to be posting every day, but doing a little bit is helpful. I think that's my overall advice about social media. You want to do enough so that you are findable as a person. These days it's sort of suspicious and slightly weird if you are not findable on social media. It's like, well, what's she hiding? Or, is she opposed to technology? It's not like you need to live on it, but just having a little bit like your picture so that people can say, oh yes, that actually is her. And it's not a bad thing to have, one of the things of LinkedIn is you can now have these sort of featured posts where it can be highlights. So maybe you gave a speech somewhere once and it's on YouTube. You can pin that so that people can see that. Or maybe you presented at a conference and you had a really great deck. Well, you can pin the PowerPoint. And so it allows you to curate a kind of greatest hits where it's just nice. It's like, what? It's your one chance on the internet to say, what? Gosh, let me think. If people were going to come across me and they were going to see a bunch of, my most positive things about me, what would they be? Oh, look, I can put them all in one place here and no one is going to judge me because literally that is the use case. Literally, that is what it is for. And so to not take advantage of it is a little crazy. So I would say, you can gear up. It's also useful to look for role models. There's probably somebody even inside your company that, you look at and you're like, I respect how she does LinkedIn. That seems kind of classy, and so find one or two people like that and then just try to reverse engineer it in your head. Like, all right, what does she post about? How often does she post? Like, what's the tenor of it? And you can model your engagement based on what that person does.
Yes, I so agree. Having a public profile adds so much to your credibility. And like you said, we have so much control and flexibility in how we curate that public profile. So why not leverage that? The good news is we don't have to, while it is important we do that, we don't have to rely only on sharing our ideas on these public platforms, especially let's say if you are someone who's working within the organization. I know there are several things you can do to build your brand and share your ideas across the organization. And I've heard you talk about many such ideas. What would you say are in your experience are some of the top ideas that really work for people within an organizational setup?
Yes. So if you're looking to build your brand inside a company, it's actually incredibly useful. I mean, there's things that are public facing and there's things that are kind of under the radar that are equally effective. I mean, we were talking earlier about the idea of once a week having a little short networking meeting. If you commit to doing that within your organization, but to do it with kind of far-flung parts of it, oh, this department, oh, that field office, people that you don't talk to very often. I mean, if you can imagine having 50 new connections in the next year in all the different parts of your company, you are going to know at such a deep level what is going on and where the bodies are buried in your company. You're going to know who can get things done. You're going to know people who like, oh, this is stuck, but this person can unstick it. And it really becomes extraordinarily valuable. So that's, just in terms of a networking perspective, that's important. It's things like volunteering to host a lunch and learn, either like literally in person or a virtual thing. It's reaching out to your comms department because they probably have an internal company newsletter of some sort, and it probably is like killing them to try to fill it every week or every month or whatever. And you could say, what? I would be glad to write an article for you about XYZ thing that I discovered or that I'm doing that's helpful. Maybe you discovered a new sales technique that's really useful, but other people could benefit from it. You could share that. You could offer to be interviewed. You could offer to write about it. You could go to them and volunteer because, again, the comms people, they're always sad and desperate. They're always looking for volunteers. You could say, what? If you ever need someone to talk to the press about, whatever, to be highlighted for something or to be, the employee that they talk to, I'd be glad to do it. They will likely, I mean, they may not call you tomorrow, but they will be very grateful and you may well get tapped because most people don't do that. They don't raise their hand. Most people are too busy and they're like, oh, it's the comms department again. And it gives you an opportunity to really shine publicly. So there's a wide variety of things you could do, even taking on high visibility, but maybe not competed for kind of things. I mean, honestly, if you volunteer to be the head of the recycling committee, you can make that a thing if you're smart about it. So there's a lot of possibilities.
Yes, yes. One expression I came across, and I'm completely forgetting. He wrote, I think it's Joe Polish who wrote "What's in It for Me." He talks about this idea of becoming a pain detective, essentially looking around and seeing where the pain points are that perhaps nobody else is raising their hand to solve, and to proactively offer to do something about that. Is, I mean, I think adding to your point is something any of us can do. So absolutely.
Yes.
Dorie, also to bring a little bit of a gender perspective into this, because I know you've done such vast research in this whole space of personal branding. I'm curious, is there any research or even from your experience anecdotally that would point to any differences in the way men and women, let's say, approach personal branding? Is there anything that, especially when I'm thinking about women in particular, that they should be more mindful of or do differently when it comes to building their brand and visibility?
Well, it's an interesting double-edged sword in many ways, right? I I often have found that audiences of women or women's groups are more sort of actively interested in or attuned to questions of personal branding. Not always, but often. And I think part of the reason for that is that they perceive correctly that women or people who are different or in the minority in whatever way are often subject to a heightened level of scrutiny. And as a result of that, it both makes us more conscious of what we're projecting, and it makes us more conscious of the fact that, oh, I better actually be really thoughtful about how to take control of that narrative. And so honestly, I think personal branding, I mean, it's important for everyone, right? I mean, nobody wants to be in a situation where their message about who they are in the world is getting misconstrued in some way. But I think kind of an advantage in some ways is that women are perhaps more aware of it and really clued in, like, oh, I need to get this right. I need to master this. And so, unfortunately, I think in some cases it comes from a certain level of unfairness. I mean, you hear all the time, in the newspapers, it's, oh, but, what did the first lady wear? And it's just like, this incredible level of scrutiny about, was it a blue dress or was it, oh, was it red this time? And it's a little silly in some ways. But we do have the advantage of just really understanding, like, okay, we're playing it as it lays. We are dealing with the world as it is. We can't perfectly control how we are seen by others, but there are a lot of things we can control upstream. We can be thoughtful about making sure that our message in our heads are clear about what we want to get across, and that we're doing everything possible in terms of living out our actions, making sure that the way we act is congruent with who we want to be in the world. And the more we do that, the less room we leave for misinterpretation. And I think that's powerful.
Yes. And in my work, what I've seen working with women is, yes, there is this initial hesitation around, should I put myself out there? Can I put myself out there? But when they do, and they do it consistently, and they see the benefits from doing that, 100% of the time, I have seen women feel so much more confident about engaging in this exercise of building their brand and visibility, and glad that they did that. So
Yeah.
absolutely. Dorie, final question before I let you go. So our work at Genomics is all about helping women live and lead consciously, which is really about living and leading with greater self-awareness about what's really important to you and what matters to you at the end of the day. So, Dorie, I'd love to know from you, what are 2 or 3 values that you are consciously building your brand around?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that's not always easy to answer, especially when you first start to excavate it, because I mean, there are lots of values that sound good. Well, but justice, yes, I support that. But it's like, all right, if we have to triage, if we have to prioritize, like, what are we really doing? And so sometimes it takes a while. It can be frustrating, but it takes a while to kind of really get a sense, to live into it. And sometimes we honestly can't do it unless and until we have it mirrored back by somebody else who sort of says, oh, but I've noticed that really you do ... And then you say, oh, I didn't know that I was doing that more than other people, or I didn't realize that stood out. So other people can be very helpful in that. But I would say that, one thing that I try to be very conscious of is, and I like this as a value because I think that it maybe sounds a little, I'll say in air quotes, frivolous, or not like a serious enough thing, but I think it's actually really quite important. I think that one of my values is friendliness. And I think that, in a kind of crazy polarized world, sometimes there's not a lot we can do, but something that honestly we can do is like have a positive attitude, like be freaking nice, try to encourage people, like just try to just make other people feel better in your engagements, make other people feel welcome. And so, I'm sure I do not always succeed at it, but it's something that I really try to do, to try to be thoughtful about being friendly to other people. That's a thing I think that we all have control over. And then if I was picking a second one, I would say, I mean, this is maybe a sort of broader mission, but it's something that's important to me personally, and I think is, hopefully useful in general, is I don't necessarily know a good, like, pithy word to describe it, but basically just inculcating the attitude that other people don't get to dictate who you are, that you dictate who you are. And for me, the whole enterprise of personal branding is like, no, you don't tell me, I tell you. I think we need to claim that, because personal branding, it's not about adjusting ourselves to the world. It's about saying, no, world, here's how it is. And that is extremely empowering at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And I have to say, your positivity comes through so clearly, so clearly. It's palpable. And on that note, Dorie, thank you so much. I am so grateful to you. I would not be exaggerating if I said your work has genuinely changed my life and my work for the better. And I know you are doing that for so many others. So thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing in the world. And thank you for joining this conversation.
Thank you, Bhavna. It's great to speak with you. Appreciate it. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.